good to talk to you, brother. It's been a long time.
Yeah,
If you remember last year, I made a reaction video to one of your videos about sobriety because I found the video
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. I
And
remember
you know
that.
what? Not many people, I guess, I'm not in the bodybuilding industry, but adjacent to it, not many people make videos that are that deep about the struggles that people face when they go through it. And somebody who's went through it on the other side relates to it. And I thought it was
Yeah,
fun to comment from both of our experiences.
yeah, for sure. Because you have a different perspective on some of the stuff regarding drug addiction and recovery too. So I think the mix of both of our experiences is going to be good.
Yeah, so just for the audience to know, recently Antoine messaged me to ask about this event that became well known in the bodybuilding industry, which is that one of the bodybuilding coaches was actually, just to give you guys a timeline really quickly on what happened. It all seems to have happened in March 2021, so quite a while ago. In March 2021, I had known this bodybuilding coach also myself, and I had learned at that time, which I'll get into more detail, some things that really bothered me about the way he was coaching about Ibogaine. So I contacted him to ask him to please let people know a couple of things so that he could protect people. At the same time, he got a bit upset with me about it, and his colleague Dave Palumbo invited me on Palumbo's show to discuss this conflict we had. So on that show, which also happened in March, coincidentally, same month that all of this began, we had this one discussion on Palumbo's show, and then right after that, it seems that the case was opened by the DEA on the coach, and at the same time, the same month, at the same time, allegedly somebody died under the care of that coach. So it seems all of it happened in March. I don't know if it had something to do with each other. The public stuff. Of course, my intention was never to have the coach caught by the police or something like that. But I don't know if me talking about it publicly with Palumbo, and then at the same time, maybe they looked into the coach and saw somebody died in Colorado around the same time. I don't know how it happened. It's very mysterious.
Yeah. Well, for sure, I think any private investigator is going to look at all the angles and will probably research everywhere on the internet, YouTube, and gather. When they make a case, I think they probably go through all angles. But yeah, when this came up, I've seen this. What's his name again? The coach.
I mean, a lie.
Yeah, I've seen him around like in thumbnails, like with Dave Palumbo, but I never really clicked. So I was like so like, curious, like, so this guy pretty much was hosting people with in need help for that with addiction and offered like the service of using the Ibogaine psychedelic to help them overcome their addiction as a fix for it or something like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, let me present you what the business model was. The reason why I know about it, by the way, because about 6 months before I stopped talking to Ameen because of some of these reasons, Amin had asked me to help him in coaching his clients because Amin had some difficulties in his personal life, didn't have much time. So I empathized with him and I helped him for a while. And our work together was good. Uh, he was a bit distracted and stuff, but he struck me as a nice guy and a genuine person and a kind person. The problem is, I don't think I've ever noticed this before. And the audience might not notice this unless they've been to addiction treatment facilities and sober livings and sometimes even AA societies. Will you see someone come up to you and say he wants to be your life coach? There are some of these people, unfortunately, a lot of addicts and alcoholics become sober and embody the principles of the AA program, which a lot of them are rooted in religious principles, altruism and so on, and service to others. And they embody them and they can even have a career based on that that's legitimate. They're really helping people. But some other people are somewhat sly. Like sometimes in AA societies, you hear about someone being 13th stepped. It was that what it's called when like a guy will try to like recruit a
Yeah,
girl initially, and then she's a bit
yeah,
sensitive because she's new to sobriety, and then you hear
yeah,
about these guys around. So
yeah,
sometimes there's also like sometimes guys will sometimes take I've noticed this personally. I don't know if this goes around the world, but I went to sober living once where there was like a ex heroin addict who had been sober for 20 years or so. I could clearly tell he was sober, but he was so obsessed with money and getting money from the different people in the sober living. Like it was so obvious. Like he would separate them from their parents, telling them that they need to not have that support. But then he would leech out money from the parents, and they wouldn't be getting it's not for our stuff. So I could see that sometime before. And, no, good.
yeah. So I'm just gonna add something is that we have to understand that everybody that went through addiction if you see it as a disease, they are sick people, including myself, right? And the thing is, are you really 100% fully not sick anymore once you stop doing drugs? It's like a long life program where you have to work every day at getting better. And as soon as you slow down, your disease and your stinking thinking can catches up to you. So, and because we're talking about human beings, there will be people like they will maybe have good intentions, but they're still addicted to other things, and maybe they have ill intentions too, because they're just human beings, right? I have some stories that I, you know, that I thought I trusted people that had like rehab facilities, and they pre. It's not because you stop doing drugs that you're fixed. I'll just say that. So it helps. It's a good beginning because you have a clear mind, but stopping drugs and having a recovery program that works really well and that is always improving is two different things. So I totally
We
believe you that this guy was like probably addicted to money and maybe power, and maybe he was sober, but was he living a program of recovery aligned with like his truth? Who knows?
to say this just for the audience that don't have this experience, I think what Antoine's referring to is there's a certain state of mind which some alcoholics believe or addicts believe that it has things in similarity that cause you to end up becoming an alcoholic. But also, I think just being an alcoholic and using those drugs changes your brain over time, making you by definition more selfish on a daily basis because you have things that you're concentrated around yourself. So that also is there. So you have to have a program to continuously nudge yourself in the right direction and catch yourself through the help of someone else who can look at it outside your perspective to catch yourself going back into these habits. And some people are what we call dry drunks, where they get sober but still act like they used to before they got sober. So that's definitely the case. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. The dry drunk example is really good, and I also call it white knuckling, where you just like
Yes.
stop doing drugs just with like pure hate and just willpower, but pretty much your whatever thing that gave you a relief is not even there anymore. So and then you don't even know how to deal with life on life's terms because you never learned it before because you used drugs or alcohol to do it. So you're just in front of this all these emotions and these challenges and these problems in life that happen to you, and then you have no way to deal with them, and you're just going through life like just so angry and stuff like that. So it is a thing, you know.
But there's another thing. This is a bit maybe controversial, but what I noticed in my personal experience, not to judge, most of my friends that are former addicts are heroin addicts. But what I noticed is among them, a lot of them, the heroin addiction is so powerful, like the mental addiction towards stimulants. It's mentally so powerful. But there's a joke in LA that a meth addict will take your drugs or your money and then help you look for it, and the heroin addict will take your stuff and not help you look for it. That's the difference. But what I've noticed, and this is a joke, of course, I'm not true, but what I've noticed is this: the heroin addict will sometimes lie to you to the depths of the end. Like there's a kind of, I don't know what it is. It doesn't. I've noticed, not found it among alcoholics, among other addicts. But so with that all said, I just wanted to say that I saw Ameen when I knew Ameen. He was a good guy, but or he seemed like a good guy. But the one thing about Ameen was that he had a great experience with Ibogaine. So years before, he went to Mexico and he did one of those in-house treatments for Ibogaine. I think he did it more than once, actually. He had great personal experiences. Like one of the ones he had was Amin had been, he told me, and I think he says this publicly, using hormones from a younger age, like teenage years. So he thought he could never get a girl pregnant. So after he went to Ibogaine the first time, he was able to do that. So it was life changing for him in so many ways. The biggest life changing way was that he was addicted to opiates for over a decade or whatever before, and suddenly he could just take it or leave it. So this is what a lot of addicts experience since the 60s when they first started trying it. By the way, just so you know, this only works with opiates, unfortunately. It doesn't do the same thing with stimulants. It's much less effective with stimulants. But with opiates, the withdrawal's gone and the obsession's gone. The obsession for stimulants is gone, but not as much in comparative studies, cocaine or amphetamines. But so it was life changing for him. So years later, I think he started to import it into the country through a company called Ibogaine, which I mention all the time, not to out the company, but because it's quite secure and everybody that does use Ibogaine mostly uses it from Ibogaine, which I think they get it from a country called Gabon, which is in Central Africa. So he had used at the same time. I didn't know. I mean, 2 years before I started using Ibogaine myself, but very carefully. I was not using it to get off drugs. I was just using it to know what it did, and I used different amounts. The standard way to use Ibogaine, maybe I should mention now. Ibogaine is a root. It's Iboga root. You can get different purifications of it. People sometimes combine different purifications, but there's one molecule called Ibogaine. This is the really active molecule. Usually what they try to do is what's called a flood dose. They do a tester dose to see if you're allergic. Then they raise the dose to over a gram or over 900 milligrams in a day or two. Now, the recent rodent studies from like 2017, 2016 show something very interesting. If you don't do the flood dose, the rodents don't have this extended lag of change in their brain. Finally, we know what that change seems to be. But if you try the flood dose yourself, you'll notice this. If you don't take a flood dose, you'll notice something different, but it won't totally quell the withdrawals, and it won't just shift your mind from addictive behavior. For example, if you smoke cigarettes, the day before you use Ibogaine, the next day the cigarettes are not enjoyable, you don't want to smoke them, so on. Naturally, you would think this means that Ibogaine is blunting your dopamine signaling. So somehow you're not getting that dopamine hit from smoking. That might be true, but the scientific studies show that the flood dose, but not lighter doses of Ibogaine, cause a long-lasting lag in what are called growth factors in the brain. The same factors that SSRIs, antidepressants rise, and the same ones that cerebrolysin rise, but they lag for weeks, which is why if you talk to an Ibogaine clinic and say, I want to get off heroin, they'll say you may need a booster dose a month later or 2 months later, because it isn't a full solution. It's a little boost to get you past a couple of weeks. The problem is a lot of the people who talk about Ibogaine present it as a lifetime solution. I have never met anybody who uses Ibogaine that does not really use it every month or 2 months. And some of them microdose it. So this is one thing there. But so Ameen had a great experience with it. And when I was knowing him, he was coaching clients for normal things. And I was helping him sometimes with some genetic analysis for the clients. And he wanted to open this Ibogaine business. I knew about it already, and I basically told him that it's very dangerous. You run the risk of fatalities, which we can talk about later. And I just also it's illegal. So I wasn't very interested in doing it. So I should give you an overview. So Ameen partnered with a lawyer, and I'll leave these names out, lawyer and a nurse of some kind. And what they did was organize a system, which I think was popularized by Palumbo's channel, which is why we may take everything with a grain of salt. But the system was to introduce people to the Ibogaine. Originally, Ameen told me when I knew him that he would have the Ibogaine sent to the person. And so he wouldn't be sending anything or selling any drugs, but him or someone else would go there to sit them through the experience of the Ibogaine psychedelic experience, which, by the way, I should comment on here. When you take Ibogaine, even at the flood dose, you really just feel like you're dying. You're not going out of your mind. There's no colors. There's nothing interesting. It's not pleasant either. You lay in bed, and basically the main issue that you would need someone to take care of you with, other than health issues, is to help you walk to the bathroom physically, because you can't walk. You're just going to shrivel up in bed, feel like your soul is dying, and have this very vague experience that you don't really understand. You don't need someone to talk you through it. You won't know what they're saying. That's the truth. But what you do need is a defibrillator, which is something that can shock your heart to restart your heart rhythms, because Ibogaine is shockingly one of the most complicated molecules that can affect the brain. It affects almost every receptor we think of in some way, and it's not even clear yet. When you take it, you feel like your brain is too busy, you can't think. You literally can't hold any thoughts. And that's really what's happening. Now, a lot of these brain hormones, like dopamine, serotonin, affect the heart rate. If you take trenbolone, one of the things that happens is adrenaline and dopamine, both neurochemicals, raise your heart rate. When you take Clen or stuff like that in the pre-contest, there's a danger. Just because your heart rate is higher, it could also end up with a different rhythm and end up with a arrhythmia, which happens to some bodybuilders. Now, that's just from a stimulant or from amphetamine or anything else. Now, what about something like Ibogaine? Ibogaine doesn't just raise the heart rate. It changes what's called the QT interval by definition. Now, what could you do for a client if you really wanted to do this dangerous thing and he didn't want to try any alternative first and he didn't want to start with a lower dose, whatever? On his genetics, you could find out his genetically determined QT interval. This has been well studied. That's good, but you could go get him in for heart performance tests to see how his intervals are doing also. But then you could maybe get him on a protective medication. Now, when you use Ibogaine, your blood pressure will shoot up also, which puts more stress on the whole system. But your heart rate is a concern, especially if your blood pressure is not low. So a beta blocker like Nebivolol, which is 24 hours. Some of these things may be useful, maybe potentially. but they weren't planning for any of these things. I told them you should consider them, but they weren't at the time. And then, yeah, so all of that. And then how the business worked is basically they would charge exorbitant amounts for the people to have this in-person treatment and go to the place. I didn't know how much the amounts were while I was working with Ameen. But one day he had a really nice guy client who hired him for coaching generally. This is around the time that I realized Ameen was not working under my ethical level, but he took $30,000 cash from the client as a payment for Ibogaine treatment. The Ibogaine cost $300. This client had already helped him for weeks and weeks. This was a difficult time for him. So he took $30,000. And I felt so bad. I didn't know what to tell Ameen that I went by myself because I was working with Ameen. And I did like a 6-7 page genetic analysis report for the client for free. It took me 3 days of constant work, more than them even watching the guy. But I felt very bad because this is totally unjust. Yeah. You know, now if the guy has a lot of money, but at least you could tell him you're paying for a service, it's not expensive. But I didn't know about any lies or mischievous stuff, just charging a lot. So I didn't think about it much. But a little bit later, things got a little bit confusing. Oh, did you freeze on my screen? No, I don't think you did.
No, you're there.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Sorry, I'm trying to get to my notes here. 1 second. Okay, so things got a little bit. Also, I should mention, Ameen was thinking that in Colorado, they would decriminalize psychedelics, which is true. They were decriminalized mushrooms, LSD, and Ibogaine. I don't know if they decriminalized all of them, but it would have happened later than the 2021 alleged death, which we don't know if it's really caused by this. So the next things that happened, I stopped talking to Ameen. I told him, brother, if you get your stuff back in track, I'd be glad to help you, but some things I can't work with and so on. And we separated in okay terms. A couple of months later, I realized Ameen had done, I asked Ameen, please don't do the Ibogaine treatment. You heard of Big Lenny? You know
Yeah,
Big Lenny?
of course.
Big Lenny has unfortunately some substance issues, but he has a very good heart and he wanted to work through them. The problem is he has liver failure and ejection fraction from his heart at the time was around 30. So he has heart failure. So I asked Ameen before I left, because I introduced Ameen to Lenny, and I asked him, please don't do the Ibogaine treatment on him. It will not, he could die, really, genuinely. Unfortunately, he did the treatment like a month later. So I was like, well, somehow Lenny lived. This guy never dies. It's thank God. But he lived. But I was like, whoa, this was really reckless. Like he knew, I told him, I knew he knew. Now, a couple of months later after that, I got a client from Orange County. I used to live in Orange County in California. And there's a client next door to me, a neighboring client. He was a very nice guy. I bought a consultation and he was suffering with addiction issues. So I spoke to him for a while. He told me he had booked Ameen before me. And he told me specifically that he said, I can't get Ibogaine and I can't afford Ameen. I said, why can't you afford the Ibogaine? He said, well, Ameen wants me to pay $3,000. I've saved a certain, I didn't mention one thing. The main thing, before I left Ameen, there was a former incident before Lenny. One day, so Ameen was working with the lawyer and the nurse. One day, he wasn't speaking to the nurse, so I mean the lawyer. So I asked him, what's up with the lawyer? He said, the lawyer is a little bit depressed. I said, why? He said, well, we had a guy on the East Coast who was a heroin addict who was accumulating 3,500 or 3,000 to pay us. He had gotten 2,000 or so, but the lawyer, will remain nameless, told Ameen, he has this money. And Ameen said, wait it out, he'll collect more. So in the waiting out, the guy OD'd on heroin. But I didn't know that they were telling him that you can't find this drug, Ibogaine, anywhere else. So fast forward to the OC guy. He tells me they're charging me the 3,000, I have less money or whatever. But he said, I can't afford the Ibogaine. I said, why? He said, there's no source online. It's only through Ameen. So I said, what the hell? So I said, what do you mean? There's Iboga World. He said, no, Ameen specifically told me Iboga World is fake. So I was like, whoa, I know Ameen orders it from Iboga World. So that's when I went and made a video without mentioning Ameen, just saying Ibogaine. And in the video, I took a big personal risk by mentioning Iboga World. It could hurt my channel, but I wanted to save. If somebody, it has no other option and thinks this thing costs $3,000, it costs $300. So you could potentially afford it and you could go about it different ways, but it's still dangerous. So that's the background there. I wanted to mention really quickly here so people don't think like this is some antagonism toward Ameen. The only reason why I mentioned these things initially, and then when Palumbo invited me on, discussed it publicly. First of all, I talked to Ameen privately and told him, please, brother, tell the people the truth. Just tell them Iboga World is real. Stop telling them you need to pay over $1,000 to get Ibogaine. Just say it's for my help. And my help could be useful. You could say that. And then stop telling people you're sober, because you're not sober and we both know it. You've never been sober while I've known you. Then he said, first he said he's going to do it. Then he told me, give it 2 days. 2 days later, he said, I can't do it. I don't want excuse. My kid's sick and I'm sick. I said, bro, it's too long. It's been too long. You're literally harming people. Your people are going to die or be screwed up because of what you're doing. So I made some video on my channel. So Palumbo invited me in his channel to discuss it. On his channel, he told me, this is your truth. I told him, somebody's already died. He said, this is your truth. We don't know if it's true. Basically, they implied that I'm a hating guy or whatever. The truth is, I'm not hating. I actually like the guy. But I feel particular when it's an addict that's being preyed on, because it could be me. And addicts are the people in the worst, sometimes the worst states mentally in the world. And they may feel they have no other option. And they may literally take this option because they trust you. And they could die. And it's because you want $3,000. You know, if it was less money, would you do the same work? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So some people will say, for example, where do you draw the line between a diet coach that someone died from, for example, and someone like selling Ibogaine? I think where you draw the line is this, right? Diet coach, first of all, a diet coach, if somebody, usually nobody dies in one go. It's something from years and years. You can't specify what caused kidney damage, heart damage, so on. But if it did happen in one go, it's not something that usually kills someone in one go. Like thyroid medication, clenbuterol. Sometimes people accuse Shelby Starnes, for example, before the competition, too many people were getting ill or whatever. But maybe it's a bit reckless. But it's a difference when you know, okay, certain people die from this, for sure. You're taking an opiate addict whose heart is already in bad condition, and you have a choice. I spent 6 days with him, and I started 300 milligrams a day. 300 milligrams, let the heart adapt somehow, take a beta block or something, or I make my time 2 days, give him the flood dose, which also, even the Mexican places, they do the same thing because they want you in and out. So they give you the flood dose as high as possible. You feel the total relief. Here's a booster, go. But that's the easiest way to get that heart attack also. So it's different. I feel like a diet coach does never give somebody, like nobody gives somebody 1,500 milligrams of DNP, and it's like wing it.
Yeah. I think the where it gets really risky for those diet coaches is near the show with the diuretics.
Yeah, diuretics and yeah.
Because they will trust the coach. They'll be like, take that, take this. And there's some diuretics that they they kind of lube the potassium,
Look,
so the potassium sparing, and too much potassium, like you could probably explain better than me, but it can make the heart stop. And that's not like that's just like a couple pills away from happening sometimes.
yeah.
And I've heard about a lot of bodybuilders and coaches that send athletes to the hospital.
And be careful, Antoine, by the way, if you're taking a blood pressure medication, almost all the blood pressure medications slightly raise potassium levels.
Mhm.
Almost all of them, which most people don't notice. If you ever notice take a blood pressure medication in the off season and you slightly cramp, but it's not that serious, check your potassium level because they'll get rid of some sodium and the potassium will go a bit higher. But what you're talking about is like when they would shoot someone with potassium and they would die
Yeah,
at the
isn't that
competition.
what the injection
I'm in
on a
Macau.
chair?
Yeah, I've heard of this before. It happened to Macau or something, I think.
Yeah, but also like when they actually when they get the lethal you know where you get
Oh, yeah, it's potassium. Yeah. True.
yeah, so they
On the
inject
chair, I did.
yeah, on the chair, the not the electric chair, but whatever they
Yeah,
call it, lethal dose of like
the
whatever.
other chair.
I think it is yeah, I think it is potassium they inject. I'm not sure, but yeah, so
No, so some of
it is
those
very
coaches do. Some of those coaches
yeah,
do reckless stuff. Like they start out Dacton 3 weeks before, and then they're using
yeah,
2 or 3 diuretics, and it's on a woman, and it's usually women know less about the diuretics than the male competitor, and she may be more suggestible. I agree about that, but if you're giving someone something that you know, I've told you someone's gonna die. You know that someone's gonna die, and you're not taking any of the precautions, but you're also lying to the people. They can't get it somewhere else, and then you're
yeah.
charging the.
The lying part is very
That's the one that stopped me. I told him you can't lie. That's not. You can charge what you want. I would prefer you tell people you're not, because one of the things he would do is he would say that I'm sober. Well, I knew him very well because I spent a lot of time with him, and he didn't hide it from me. But the thing is, basically, what Ameen learned was really convenient. He basically became an Ibogaine addict. So what he would do is he would go on cycles every week, like 3 days. He would use not hard drugs. He was not using heroin and stuff like that, but kratom, mushrooms, stuff like that. Later I heard pills again, but I knew about kratom, mushrooms, marijuana. Then 3 days later, if he feels I'm not totally on point, he'll do one Ibogaine hit that day. And so sometimes, for example, once when I was helping him, I went to Florida to visit him. He never showed up at Florida. He asked me to come please to accompany him. I didn't need to go. I came. When I was at the airport, I was talking to someone. They said, "I think Ameen is not gonna show up." I said, "No, it can't be. I've talked to him. We booked him the flight. I booked him the flight." So then I arrive in Florida, but he's not an addict, so it was confusing. So I arrived in Florida. He didn't show up. So I called him, "Ameen, what are you doing?" He's like, "I'm doing an Ibogaine dose." I was like, you got yourself stuck again for 3 days, and you're doing this again." So I tried. By the way, while I was with him, I tried it. At the time, I was completely sober. I tried to get him completely sober off marijuana. Was his main thing. I tried, but it was impossible. So there are limits to what this ibogaine thing is. Not like God sent. It's not going to solve your problems
Well,
by itself.
I think for me, what I've got from from that is that, so you're an addict, and then you're like, okay, there's this thing that's gonna help you and keep you clean, whatever, right? Or get you clean and reset your brain. But it's like the AZ way, the AZ fix is never the thing that's gonna work, because the AZ fix to feeling better is what got you in trouble in the first place. You know, like you feel bad. Like, oh, it's the fastest way I could feel good. Take this right now. And then within seconds or minutes, you'll feel more than just normal. You'll feel great. So that mentality of like going and seeking out something to like fix everything is just, it's not the right motive to even to take that. And I think as for me, I never tried it and I never considered trying it, because anything that's going to alter my mind, I got to be like away from it. You got to be really, really careful, because it falls under the whole umbrella of like the substances that I need to avoid. Because even in 2020, I tried drinking again, just like here and there, and I could drink, and then nothing bad would happen, and then I'm like, okay, I'll drink again in 2 weeks. But the thing is, I would drink that my drink, and I'd be like, okay, when am I going to feel something? Like that's not how
I know.
people drink.
What is
Normal
this?
people, they drink socially, they'll taste, they'll laugh. I was like, bang. I'm like, okay, when am I going to feel this?
Can I give
So,
you another one? They eat after they're drinking. They're drinking and eating a burger. You're like, what are you doing? Then you won't feel the
you
drink.
know, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So all I would think about is the next time that I could drink that's like acceptable to be reasonable. So, but that led to like a full relapse eventually, of course, because if I start drinking, I can't have my recovery program at the same time. So it's like one or the other, really. You can't have both, in my opinion, from
Mm.
where I'm standing. So yeah, for me to get clean and sober, it was just a lot of suffering, a lot of like rock bottoms, getting humbled by life and my mistakes a lot, and like 5 rehabs and lots of failures and relapses, and just not giving up and just keep going at it and having like a strong recovery program. So I think people, they try to seek out what's the easiest. What's the less work? What will take less work to give me the
Yeah.
results? It's like Ibogaine seems like a good thing. But the things, I don't know enough about it. I just know that psychedelics sometimes they do help the brain reset some stuff. And it could be a clean slate for somebody, but for me, that would be like a last resort. Like I did 5 rehabs. Okay, maybe after 8, go try Ibogaine if that's gonna work. But you don't get clean right away. It's not a one shot deal. All right, I'm gonna stop. I'll take this, bing bang. It's like clean slate. I'm good. It might reset some of the stuff, but it might remove the obsession. But I've lost the obsessions many times. I would surrender, and then the obsession was removed, and then I was do my rehab, get out, and then if I don't do work the program, at some point I can start the obsession can kick again. And I've
Yeah.
had a few times, like in the year and a half, I had the obsession was like twice it really happened. It was there every 15 minutes. I would think about drugs every day, but then I worked through it, and I knew that sometimes it's normal for an addict that this happens, and I just used my program to deal with that, and then it went away. But in the past, it would come back, and I would like fail. So yeah, maybe you could remove the obsession for a month, whatever, but your brain is like, it's not going to be fixed with one dose of something. It's a lot of like therapy and like rewiring your brain with just like conscious habits that you're going to do every day. I think
This is
that's
the key
that's
point.
yeah, I think that's what's going to be the most effective. And plus community, having a, because I'm a 12 step guy. So 12 step for me, from what I've seen in all the rehabs I've done and all the meetings I've done and the people in recovery that I've talked to, is the one thing that if you go 100% with it, chances are it's really going to work. And another thing I could say briefly is that in all the rehabs, I always hear about like, oh, 98% of the people here right now won't make it and will relapse. And then we're like 60 people to rehab, and they tell us that. And my last rehab, I heard it again, and I said, okay, yeah, but that 2%, what does that 2% do? If I do exactly what they do, then it's 100% it's going to work. But nobody wants to get out of a rehab and have an exit plan, do 90 minutes in 90 days, and just do everything right, because it's a lot of work and sometimes it's boring and it takes discipline. So 98% of the people, they won't do that, so it's going to fail. So
But
I would be really curious. I would be really curious how like the Ibogaine thing really transfers to like a long life of like learning how to deal with life on life's terms and having a really good life and not just like white
mm,
knuckling it and surviving. Yeah.
Antoine, everything you just said, I have strong opinions of, and I agree with you, and I see them from a neuroscience perspective also. So, for
Yeah.
example, in the brain, the basic psychology of the brain is called association theory, which means neurons make connections to each other. Thing is, no associations can be removed. That's why an alcoholic stops drinking for 5 years. Within a month, he's drinking the exact same amount he was before.
Yeah.
Because we've associated that. And even though you haven't used it for a while, it's not that strong, it's there. And if you let it go there, it'll go there. The problem is the only way to remove this association, because you can't remove it, is to strengthen another one. And that can only happen with action. It can't happen with even a spiritual experience. Now, the other thing you talked about was and for people that don't know the 12-step programs, they're based on a lot of fundamental wisdoms that have come from religion and other places, like and insights about human happiness, and also a lot of 19th century literature, including the ideas of having solidarity, community, close friendships, working in service of others, some concepts from perennial philosophies. One of them is a spiritual connection, which is what they call a higher power. But this spiritual connection has to yield what they call a spiritual experience. And this was originally observed by one of the founding authors of AA, who encountered a religious man who gave up drinking and was beaming and happy. And he was confused because he thought most people give up drinking, are annoyed and just white knuckling it through life. But this guy looked, he was completely happy. And they were able to replicate that with AA, taking some of these fundamentals out of it. So the spiritual experience, Antoine, is where I think the value of those psychedelics is. Some people cannot experience that subjective, it's just in their brain, experience that makes them look at the world from a different way. And for those people, sometimes it's useful to do these. I wouldn't do them personally, and because they're risky also. Doing these like infusion therapies of ketamine or the different things that they do like that. But Ibogaine is not like that. Ibogaine is not a spiritual experience. Like I said, you won't remember anything. Ibogaine, nobody really was talking about how it works. I tried to figure it out myself because I didn't want to use it anymore. I really realized from the research, it seems to be the most obvious thing is this boost in neurogenesis. Why does that matter, by the way, Antoine? First of all, I tried with cerebrolysin, another way to get very high amounts of neurogenesis. Maybe not as much. Cerebrolysin is an injectable, purified version of pigs' neurotrophic factors for their brain. Sounds weird. It's a water-based solution. It works very well. It gives you basically what an SSRI or antidepressant will. People think SSRIs work through serotonin. The real effect is from these growth factors. They're like GH for the brain. When you have growth factors in adult, your brain can adapt. The problem is when you're using drugs, by the way, or any drug, dopaminergic drugs, opioidergic drugs, they make your brain, because there's so many activities in your brain, they make them plastic. They can change. So your brain's constantly adapting to your addictive life till you get sober. Suddenly, when you get sober, you have a paucity of all these hormones in the brain. You have this rigid brain. The idea with Ibogaine is just before you stop, you get this hit bolus of growth factors that goes for weeks, even in rodents. Now, those growth factors seem to block dopaminergic need. So right now, if you take a Seroquel, for example, quetiapine, if you take enough of it and do a dopaminergic drug, you won't even feel it because it's blocking the dopamine receptors. It seems when you have very high growth factors, it does that a bit. Does that, but also makes your brain malleable. So there's some value there. Now, you were talking about in AA, there's this concern about using other chemicals to replace other chemicals, which is a very justified concern. In fact, there's a
Well,
group.
there's just the thing with AA, they only talk about alcohol. So you can actually, there's people smoking weed in AA and they can still do the
Yeah,
program. But I do NA, which is like everything.
yeah, but in
But
AA, they don't like the guys that smoke the weed and stuff. It's
they
called
just
weed maintenance therapy. Yeah.
yeah, but they just like sometimes they just don't care. There's been people that they smoke weed for years that do the AA and they just
Yeah.
maybe don't talk about it because they see alcohol as the problem. But my program is like englobes all the substances. And the thing is, if back in the 30s and the 40s when Bill and Bob wrote the AA program and went through all that, if back then there was the fentanyl crisis, it would have been NA back then. It's just back then
Yeah.
alcohol was killing people more than anything else.
And a lot of people were using drugs, but they would still put it under drinking in the original stories at the back of the book.
Yeah,
But
yeah, you could the story of like Dr. Bob's when
yeah,
he was a real addict. He wasn't
yeah,
just like an
uppers
alcoholic.
and
And
downers and some of the
I was
stories.
so surprised when I read that. I'm like, oh my God, this guy was wild. He was actually shooting up like these
In the
like
car.
yeah, like just to go to sleep. He
Yeah,
was
yeah.
intravenous drugs just to go to sleep, then he would wake up and take some pills and then drink all day. It's like this guy was wild.
I mean, brother, I don't know if you know this, but the first time that there was a big popularity of ecstasy and amphetamines in the US was in the 30s and 40s, actually. In the 30s and 40s, there was a literature group in the East Coast that popularized it. They used to take inhalants and take the parts out of the inhalants, which at the time I guess were stronger or something, and put them in teas and drink them. There's a long history of this stuff. You know, opium was still an addictive thing in the 1800s, even in the US, especially among the Asian communities. But yeah, what I was going to say is there's another group though called the Pacific Group in AA, where you cannot, they will not accept you. First of all, you have to wear a suit whenever you go there. I've been to a couple of these organizations, and they will not. If you take an antidepressant, you've heard of them?
I don't think so.
They're in the U.S.
I've heard about the AA meetings in the US where you have to wear suits.
Really?
That's them.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a group. Okay.
Oh yeah. So you can't, if you take an antidepressant, they want you out. And they say if you have dual diagnosis, which means you have depression or something, then you don't belong to part of the society. They're very strict on that.
Oh,
I have different views about this myself, maybe because I had some anxiety from before alcoholism. And for me, like alcoholism was sort of a treatment for anxiety. You can work on the anxiety through my meditation, religion, so many other things, friendship, all of the things in AA. But sometimes, for example, just having a slightly high neurogenesis level for a period of time can make some people feel much better as long as it's not a drug you can abuse. So an Ibogaine is something you can abuse. It's exact, it's fast. But
yeah.
SSRIs, for example, raise the neurogenesis level just slightly and keep it there. And so for me, they were really helpful personally. I don't know, we got a bit off topic, but this was a very interesting discussion.
No, it was, yeah. But the thing with the antidepressants and the program and all these medication is that it's also the motive. You have to be honest with yourself. What's the motive behind you wanting to take that? And it has to be prescribed. And sometimes there's a part that says it's outside issues, which means
Yeah.
like it's like mental issues. Like you got to deal with that on the outside of the program. So there's more compared to the Pacific Group, I guess. Like NA and even AA nowadays around here is like a lot more flexible. There were they're tolerated more all kinds of people, especially NA. I mean, there's people in there with like because the thing is like addiction and mental health. There's never just this is only that and only that. There's always like a mix of both most of the time. If you look at, for example, like I've been watching these videos about LA, downtown LA, and
I lived in
homeless.
downtown LA for 6 years, 5 years,
Oh my God.
literally by Skid Row, 2 blocks, and I was sober. Imagine
Holy
that, bro. I would walk by that because I was a friendly guy and I like talking to people. So they would, some people outside smoking crack. I'd never seen someone smoke crack. You're smoking crack. Like, you want to come inside the tent? Okay. I go inside the tent. I'm not smoking crack. I'm like writing notes. I thought I'd write a book, like, you know, that YouTube channel that interviews. Have you
Yes.
seen it?
I just
Bro,
saw the podcast of Rogan.
oh,
Yeah.
okay, that channel,
What's
I
it called?
lived right next to it, and I had that idea.
Soft
I just never
Underbelly.
did.
Soft Underbelly. It's
Huh?
called Soft Underbelly. The YouTube
Exactly.
channel.
I lived
Yeah.
right next to him for years, met the same people.
No way.
I thought of doing the same interview. Bro, I tell you one thing about that place. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of homeless people in Skid Row by this open air drug market right in front of the police station.
Yeah,
They
they don't
all,
care.
Bro, I asked them, many of them have Section 8 housing in different Palmdale, Lancaster. I said, why don't you live in Section 8 and come later? I said, no, this is fun. I said, and then I've asked a few of them, did you ever hear voices before you started using meth? I've never heard someone say yes. So there's a lot of mental illness there, but having high dopamine levels produces schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. That's why there's so much bipolar disorder among Hollywood actresses that have used a lot of cocaine back in the day. And in my experience, I've known so many, even gangsters in LA that became meth addicts, just change. You know,
Oh yeah, sure. And the thing is, I know that even in the rehabs, all the people that were schizophrenic, that were diagnosed with something like that, they were all like white guys between 20 and 30, and weed fucked them up. It was weed for them.
weed also
Weed,
does that sometimes.
the time was weed mixed with amphetamines, both of them together. It would mess them up. But
Mm.
everybody that was like that came in just for weed, I'm like, oh yeah, that's gonna be a weird one, because if weed brings you to rehab, because most people who smoke weed, they're just gonna be lazy and their life is not too unmanageable. You know, it's not a death threat. But if it's if weed is a death threat to you, like what kind of brain do you have to end up in rehab?
So
But off
this
the
is the,
weed and on medication, they were, I was friends with a lot of them actually in rehab because they were a little bit different. And
wait, Antoine,
but
Antoine, I'll tell you something funny. So when you're in rehab, you start to when you first come in, you start to judge everybody. Like, am I in the right place? Like, are these people as hardcore as me? Can they save me? And you meet somebody who has like a masturbation addiction in your mind because you never heard of it before. You're like, I do that, I get away with it. So you can't handle what I could do. So if they're solving you, they're gonna solve me. Or like a weed addiction. I was like, I was fine when I smoked weed. So you have this judgment like, no, they can't handle me here. I gotta go somewhere else. Your brain naturally will doubt everything when you go on. So I think that's what you're talking about, right? Yeah.
yeah, no, but yeah, when I first came in the rehabs, you always have a 2 days where I'm more quiet and I just try to like seize everybody up. But the last one was pretty tough because it was mostly people from the street, or alcoholics that were a little bit older, or people that came in from the court, court ordered.
Oh, it was a government one?
Huh?
Government one. It was a government one,
Yeah,
not a private.
yeah, court order. Like, yeah, instead of like going to jail, you go there.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't relate with these people because me, I went there and I wanted to I was full on recovery, especially 12 step. But then there was a friend of mine that came in, and well, he became a friend. He was like a family dad of like a lot of kids, and he was just like a drinker. And I was like, he had a business, and I'm like, man, finding somebody I can talk to, but it's pretty hard. But the thing is, what they teach us in the program also is that really helps me sometimes is that don't look at the differences, look at
Yeah,
the
look at the similarity. Exactly.
similarities.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but it's an initial thing. You have that.
yeah,
Yep. By the way, I had the same thing. My last one was court ordered and it was hectic. I didn't know who to talk to because nobody wanted to be there and they weren't trying it seriously,
yeah,
but they would give free food. So people would just come eat the food and go. And I was like, I don't know what to do here. I gotta hang out with nobody because I'm really serious. This can't
yeah.
happen to me again.
I know, and
I met
yeah,
a couple like you. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of I think it was my second rehab. It was mostly people from the street, and sometimes what they would do, they would actually uh, during the winter, they'd just go in the rehab, or even like around like the
True.
second week of the month, go into rehab, check themselves in, sleep for 5 days, eat the food, and then the first of the month, gone because the
People
check.
do that in jail. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
how do
true.
they get out of jail? Oh, they check themselves in jail when it's cold.
No, they like do a small crime, and LA has like overcrowding. You get if you're cold, you can go and like to eat. If there, it happens. That's interesting. Wait, can I comment on something though? There's something
Yeah,
like really puzzling about opioid addiction, which makes it a unique problem. Which is, I guess, why Ibogaine is somewhat helpful. Which is that the opioid receptors, which respond to natural hormones called endorphins, dynorphins, and some of them with a K. But these three opioids. These opioid receptors, when they're agonized, and by the way, endorphins released when you exercise to lower the pain, you feel it. Once they're agonized, they downregulate. So now, nicotinic cholinergic receptors, which respond to nicotine when you smoke, they upregulate. So you can potentially absorb more nicotine with time. The opposite happens with opioid receptors. That's a problem because the withdrawal comes from the opioid receptors. So the more and There's tachyphylaxis, what they call it in biology. The more you use the drug, the least effective it is. So by definition, when you're using the opioid, you're going to get more and more of withdrawal with time. It's going to be harder and harder. At the same time, the dopamine receptors, remember, all why we call all drugs dopamine is because they all indirectly affect dopamine transmission. And that's the addictive part, the habituating part. Dopamine receptors, due to being very fragile, that's why people get Parkinson's. They need to protect these dopamine receptors and dopaminergic neurons. They also not only die, but they also downregulate as a consequence to dopamine. That's why you're always chasing the magic dragon. That's why the first high is always the best high. Also, because some of the cells die, keep in mind. Like if you use a lot of stimulants, that when everything's bright, that's stuff dying in your head, and it'll never come back, but it's not that much dying. It's not to be depressed about. We have cognitive reserve. The point is this: with opioids, you have tachyphylaxis at two ends, both toward the withdrawal and toward the lower dopamine signaling. So it's burning the candle at both ends. And I think it makes it really difficult for people to get off it. Sort of in the same way that benzos, you're getting this fear of seizures, death, and at the same time getting way less reduction of anxiety or higher dopamine. So for these guys, sometimes in their mind, it's if I could get through the withdrawal, I'll be fine. So I think they're thinking of the Ibogaine, like if I could just get through this for 2 weeks, I can handle the rest. But most of the guys I know have done it, keep doing the boosters and stuff like that, because they don't realize what was about the Ibogaine. Now, every time they do this, they're putting that change in QT interval, the heart rate, and all that stuff, kind of stuff. So it's not really sustainable.
Yeah, the thing that's crazy though is like, I mean, addicts will do that. It's like I've done that before. You take stuff you don't even know where it's coming from. So I'm not surprised they would go into the Ibogaine and do it like almost blindlessly and just trusting whoever is going to give it to them, because they've been doing that in the street for like maybe years, right? But the thing that should happen is that I've always heard about that. I know I learned about Ibogaine years ago, and I said, oh, you gotta go somewhere. There's a doctor and a nurse, and they just help you like not choke on your vomit for 12 hours or something. So that's what I heard. I said, oh, that kind of makes sense. But as far as like being on, what are you like? What's your profession? And you're gonna host people and just give them that? There's, it's very sketchy. So I don't know. I feel that if there should be something with the Ibogaine involved, because it's a very strong drug. Obviously, if you think you're dying, it should be like way more.
Emergency room technicians, literally.
Yeah,
it's the only way. Emergency room technicians, like you need the defibrillator there. If this stuff starts happening, you need the staff there. It's in fact, you don't even need, honestly, just an ambulance outside. You need the technicians there in case something happens.
You just do it in. Is there centers for real? Like,
no, these are Mexico and Canada are the best, but they're sort of not fully. Canada has, by the way, I've heard.
I thought it was one in Toronto or something.
I think so. And you guys have interesting laws. You guys also have like, I've heard this is true, but I don't know if it's true. Is heroin legal, not just methadone? Or is just Europe they have that?
No, I just know that in BC there's this one guy. Yeah, they're trying to change a bunch of laws, so it's for like under 2.5 grams, it won't be criminalized. So there's this one guy who's like trying to open up a store to give like clean stuff. But the thing is like
without fentanyl.
Yeah, well, yeah, because sometimes with that stuff is that you don't even know if it's laced with something else. Then I've heard of people dying. They were snorting something, or they take the street Xanax, and then in it, it's laced with like a lethal dose, which is a pencil tip, right? So I've heard people dying of that. So it's like you think you're gonna just, oh, I want to relax and go to bed, and then you're just dead. So it's like
I've heard of them putting it in weed. Imagine someone smoking weed. No,
it's like
what?
Yeah, cocaine, but the thing is, if you have a scale,
you can measure it.
Let's say this is a scale. Oh, you got to measure your the little pieces of fentanyl, whatever, and then bag it, and then well, let's put the rocks of something else on it. I'll wipe it off with the rocks. But the thing is, you don't need a lot to kill somebody who's not been using it. So sometimes I think it's like just things like that probably happen. Like, or maybe the guy took a used baggie and put the stuff in there, but there was fentanyl in the bag before. Just like it can be as stupid as that, because obviously there's people making the shit. There's like people bringing the country. There's like big names, and then there's all the little dealers, and then at the end there's the street dealers. These guys are sometimes addicts, so
Yeah.
they will like fuck around and be like not very strict with their stuff, right? So this is where like mistakes that can happen, and now with fentanyl, people can die from simple mistake.
Bro, have you noticed someone was telling me? So I've been around addiction for so long in my life. I can catch funny things about all our different addictions. So I used to be a severe alcoholic. I've done other things also, but I never stuck to one other thing. And I've had friends who were ex-heroin addicts. But I'll tell you, like sometimes they lie to me for no reason. I notice these funny things they do. I have sometimes ex stimulant addicts. Sometimes what I notice about them, sometimes their jaw will dislodge slightly. And it happens to everybody, even while they're using a stimulant. Sometimes you don't notice your jaw will be like, and it's impossible to correct. It's so annoying. So I've talked to my friends about that for a while. I was gonna say the fentanyl addicts. I had some subscriber tell me this, but I never saw it because I moved out of downtown LA, thank God, around COVID when. But it was just starting to attack women on the street, random women for no reason. Just like, yeah, if you have a girlfriend coming to your place, she would get attacked on the street or chased down the street.
Yeah, mobs, yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't see this. But apparently, recently, when the fentanyl really sunk in with people, people started to develop like hunches. Have you seen this? Where people
Oh
are
yeah.
like
Well,
hunched over?
look, if you're smoking with a tinfoil multiple times a day, you're like that. Your body will be in the shape
Ah,
of
because
like
they're not
smoking.
shooting.
No, they're smoking it on like
Ah, that's
tinfoil
why.
sometimes, or they're
That makes
shooting
sense.
too. But even if they're shooting, they're like on the ground. They're all like hunched up like that, doing their stuff,
And
mixing it. Oh,
that's so
and
crazy.
they're also falling asleep. They're nodding off.
Yeah, nodding off consistently to it just got stuck there.
Yeah, they're like
Man, this
just like yeah. I've
this
seen
is
the
chemical
weirdest.
warfare, man. This is chemical
Oh yeah,
warfare.
chemical warfare. Like the war on drugs is real. It's just you're never gonna win that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
this drug is how
yeah.
you this is serious.
Oh, I think it's the thing that kills the most men between certain age of like I don't know the data
Younger man.
exactly, but yeah, but like 20 to like I don't know 35, it kills the most people, most men, and compared to anything else. Driving, the drunk driving, cigarettes, anything, it just kills the most people. People talk about like pandemics and stuff like that. Dude, the fentanyl pandemic is the real thing happening.
Wow.
It's just been going up and up and up.
Have you ever seen someone that moved eventually to only using fentanyl and got off it completely for a period of time? Off opiates fully.
Yeah,
Oh, so it
yeah,
happened. It's possible? It's not that.
it is possible. Yeah, it happens all
Is
the
it like
time.
methadone where they're in pain for 2 years? That kind of thing?
Some people they just go through the withdrawals and it's terrible, and they're just for 2 weeks a month they're kind of fucked in bed, but they have like support, like family, or they go to detox,
Mm.
and then they go straight to a program, and sometimes they stop that and they slowly stop everything else, or sometimes they just are on Suboxone for a
Mm.
long time, or methadone for an even longer time because the program to taper off is long. But yeah, no, it is possible. Like in the rooms, there's a lot of people that stop opiates, fentanyl, and all this stuff. And yeah, yeah, no, it's possible. I think it's very actually common. A lot of the addicts, the meetings I do around here, probably half of them is like
Fentanyl.
opiates. Yeah,
But I didn't know fentanyl was doable because methadone is hard if you've been on it for a few years, or even Suboxone. They're much harder to give up. I
no,
think
it
maybe
is
due to
because
half lives.
as soon as you decrease 1 milligram, you fucking have a mini withdrawal. So it's like
Yeah,
so you're like I don't know. The thing with me, I never went through that, so I'm lucky in that sense.
yeah.
But if you would just like, what's better, stop everything and then go in a detox, or be really like a supervised, suffer for 2 weeks of the worst 40 times the flu that you ever felt, like times 1,000, and just you feel like you want to die. There's no way in hell you can be comfortable. Plus, you're suffering all of that. You do that for 2 weeks, or you do like a 10% of that every month, but it just kind of never goes away because you're always going down 1 milligram, feel like shit, and then you're always like you rather just like rip the band-aid off or just
That's what I
explode
saw. Yeah,
it off.
that
It's just
makes
I don't
sense.
know.
That's
There's
what I'm saying.
two ways to do it, but the methadone program is, I think it's suspicious sometimes.
Oh yeah.
I've never really saw somebody that was like, yeah, it really worked for me.
No, no.
It's like
It's liquid handcuffs. You're stuck. You're
I know
stuck to this place.
Suboxone, I can understand why it could help people because you go in acute withdrawals if you use while you're on it. So you're gonna kind of like right away feel weird. And so people can just stop for 3 days and wait. But also it's also like you can taper faster without feeling too much.
They
like
usually
drugs.
tape really fast, ideally, yeah. And it has, you're right, it has like a one of the opioid receptors agonizes, another it blocks, so it does some.
There's Narcan in it. You know,
Oh,
the
really?
thing for to revive the people that overdose. There's a little bit of Narcan in the Suboxone.
Naloxone, okay. Yeah, it's called naloxone, I think, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, then tell me why before we leave the opioid discussion. So, what do you think of Kratom? I bet you have a similar view as me about Kratom.
You know what Kratom is that I had somebody send it to me. That's actually a big online persona. I guess I won't say his name, but he had an opiate addiction and he used that. So he sent me a bunch. I'm like, man, that's like a mind altering substance. I can't. I don't need. What's my motive? So I just threw it away. I didn't use it. So I've actually never used it. But I
No,
know
it's an
somebody.
opioid.
Yeah, I knew somebody who was like she had like she was taking pills for her back, but I think she was misusing them. Somebody that I was in a relationship before, and she would use that the other days, but then it was like what I saw was more like she would do that as a crush before waiting to take the other stuff. But I've heard things that it can help with withdrawals, and I know one person who actually he wasn't even using opiates, but he was like whatever. He was using drugs, and then he's like kind of like transferred to that to like, but it's like a gray area. Also, it's like, but I've seen it help some people, but I think sometimes it's like, why do you want to still use something? That's the question. Why do you want to use something still? The addict thinking patterns. That's what needs to be fixed. Like, why are you trying to? We're seeking out something that's not good.
So if they're using it for recreational reasons, I completely agree. If you're going to do something recreational and you're not an addict, for example, marijuana must be much safer for you than to use an opiate. Even if kratom is somewhat safe for some people, is agonizing. Not all. So some of the molecules in it affect adrenaline, which is why there's an upper kind of one. And of course, kratom has different strains. So one of the advantages of strains, right? You're not getting the exact same drug each time. So the receptor can respond to a different molecule each time a little bit. So your tolerance doesn't seem to get worse. Usually the kratom guys who use it all the time for pain, they'll change their strain every day. So they, like marijuana users will, so they keep getting a feeling. So in that sense, because it's not a medicine, it's not an isolated molecule, you can't adapt to it as fast. So hopefully the tachyphylaxis, the reduction in value of the drug should be slower. But the problem at the end of the day, we go back to this issue of the opioid receptors and the dopamine receptors. These receptors downregulate. So there are a couple of, actually, I'm friends with one of them. There's a couple of people in the industry that promote kratom also. And I've mentioned this to them directly, but at least if you're promoting it for pain, my issue then is just this: if you have pain in the gym, you should feel it, because if you're not feeling it, you're just gonna burn that joint.
It's a signal that there's danger somewhere. Pain is like a signal your body's telling you that something's wrong.
Bro, a lot of the guys who used to use that drug that Duchenne popularized, that was opiate, Nubain,
yes.
The guys who use Nubain, if you notice, a lot of them had joint issues a few years later. Now, that could be coincidence, but they were pushing themselves hard. And if you feel pain from a joint, like I do sometimes from my shoulders or something, if I just don't feel it, I can lift more, but I stop, right? So that's one thing. But the other thing is maybe you have chronic pain or something, or it comes once in a while. Maybe kratom may be safer a little bit than opiates because it's not so isolated. But the danger is this: you're still going to develop that downregulation. So I suggested actually to one of these guys, I said, hey, if you want to promote this, maybe an ethical way to promote it is to say your receptors for opioids will downregulate. Look at the research on low dose naltrexone therapy. Have you ever heard of this? So naltrexone is like naloxone, similar drug. I think it's longer acting. Naltrexone blocks opioid receptors. When an opioid addict goes off opioids, he usually will use like 200 milligrams to totally block the receptors. Makes you depressive a bit. It's not pleasant. And alcoholics use it too. Or they'll use something like 50 milligrams. The low dose amount is 4.5 milligrams. It's a very small amount, just enough to block the opioid receptors a bit. There's a ton of research on this in the last 10 years, over 10 years, showing if you block these opioid receptors a bit, you actually get an upregulation of the opioid receptors. Your standard pain level is actually lower. But interestingly, I don't know if you know this, when you agonize opioid receptors, you weaken your immune system, which is not really good for everything. The low-dose naltrexone therapy lowers your inflammation by improving your immune system's ability to fight viruses and bacteria, including potentially the virus we just dealt with for the last couple of years. So it's pleiotropic and upregulates your opioid receptors instead of bashing them down.
Is it mind-altering?
No, you'll not notice you take it. Just slight, like if you have some pain, it should be slightly less because your receptors are upregulated.
Yeah.
And so, but now that's a great solution for someone long term. But if somebody was using kratom, I can't convince them that it's a bad thing. But if you're, or not a good choice, maybe overall, maybe for people like me. But, and by the way, I don't respond to opioids well. Like I don't get addicted to them easily. I'm not one of those guys. But still, I wouldn't play with kratom too much. But if you did, and you did like 3 times a week, maybe 1 or 2 days you do the low dose naltrexone, upregulate the receptors, so you're not burning the candle at both ends, because it's going to go badly eventually.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, you take the less things possible. That's the ultimate solution, right?
And something that doesn't have an acute effect. Like when you take low dose naltrexone, you shouldn't feel it. It should be like a supplement. You're healthy.
That's totally fine. But like anything that's like, that will make you feel a certain way, you gotta be really careful because the brain loves patterns so much. Take it once, maybe you're fine. Twice, chances that you'll do it a third time. Do it a third time, fourth time is guaranteed, pretty much.
Anything that activates your dopamine, and once you agonize the opiate receptor, dopamine will be released.
Like, and so anything that you're taking, or that you're thinking of doing, you gotta ask yourself, like, in your heart, is this really the right thing for me to do? And then if you really take a moment and get out of your fucking head a little bit, really try to feel like, is this the right thing to do right now? What's the best for me? Would I give this to my 5-year-old daughter? Would I give that to her? You know,
can I ask? Perfect introduction. Listen to this. So do you believe that there are some people that really think that there's something magical about drugs? Like there are some people, I swear to God, they think marijuana can cure cancer. And they really, actually, one of them is Ameen. Ameen had huge arguments with me about this strain of marijuana can cure cancer. I'm trying to get it. It will do it. And I'm like, brother, this doesn't make sense. It's nonsensical. Even through the cannabinoid agonist, it doesn't make sense. But there's other people that tell you marijuana just changed my life. Or like, to be honest with you, I don't know how spiritual you are, but even the DMT stuff. I don't give drugs this kind of secret thing. And I think it's dangerous to do so because, for example, I won't name who this person is, but this person was another person, a bodybuilding coach who was into Ibogaine. This guy, he told me this. I didn't ask him about it. He told me thinking, I don't know, that I wouldn't judge it. I told him, this is insane what you just did. This is reckless, unbelievable. And you may cause your child autism. But what he did was, he gave, with her permission, his, again, reckless girlfriend, Ibogaine at a flood dose while she was breastfeeding the baby. Now, the baby's much older. You can almost clearly tell the baby's autistic. And autism, by the way, one of the theories of it is high serotonin signaling as a baby, or high growth factors in the brain as a baby.
In the belly or as a baby?
No. While it was in the belly, would be protected. While it was breastfeeding, in the belly, it's more protected. Yeah. So that's just to show you, like, some of these people, they may believe that this thing is God sent, but you shouldn't fall into their trap.
And the thing is, fuck, the baby doesn't have any consent.
No, bro. You may have just ruined the child's mind for life. For life.
Well, this is all speculations, obviously. Like maybe, the child is fine, or maybe if he has autism, it was just, that's how it was supposed to be anyway. But yeah, you're literally like, you are what you eat. So if you take something, you know what, when you piss.
No, he told me I saw a difference in the child's actual behavior afterward. He was very happy about this. Yeah.
If you take a drug and you piss on the drug test, you're gonna piss dirty. I'm pretty sure if you would squeeze the milk, there's drugs in the milk.
100%, bro. I've researched this so much because I had a child recently.
Yeah, so moral of the story, don't don't fucking take drugs when you're breastfeeding.
Wait, no, they did it intentionally to put it in the breast milk to give it to the kid. It was planned because they believe it's a magical thing.
Oh, they're crazy.
Yeah, bro, I'm trying to tell you, and I'm leaving the person nameless because I'm not a prevention person. The only reason I ever talked about Ameen was just to protect people.
Like, that's pretty much, in my opinion, like child abuse or something.
Yeah, it is child abuse. But there are people like that. So, and these are coaches that some of you guys trusted and would ask for this kind of help from. So keep in mind, people have different perceptions. It may not be just that they're greedy. It may be they think this thing is good.
Oh,
and they think even if you have no consent, you should take it.
I know. You know what? We started the podcast earlier, like saying that there's all kinds of human beings. So even in recovery and people who are sober, there will still be all kinds of crazy people. So the thing is, you have to understand that human beings, that they vary from one end to the other. If you're around the middle, usually like it's pretty good, but there's like always outliers in all different aspects of life in all different industries of life, including fitness and bodybuilding. So I wouldn't put your trust fully into somebody unless like you're doing like your own research of like their track record, what they're giving you, ask questions, and maybe you're like, be really, really careful because the thing with bodybuilding is that because of I started bodybuilding like 2003 when I was like pretty much 14, 15 years old. And then in the magazine, there's already ads for supplements. Take this, it will do that. So from the get-go, when you're bodybuilding, you have the mentality that things that I will ingest will make me better. So people keep that mentality for their whole career. And then there's people in there that will be like, take this, take that, with that mindset. But who are they? The crazy thing with me with these coaches is that where did you like? Why? Like there's some top coaches that have been there in the 90s, the 2000s, top guys, like even like Olympia winners. They coach all these guys. I'm like, why are people listening to you? Who are you? Experience in like growth science? Like I won't say the guy's name, but it's like he coached some of my friends and he coached some of the top guys. He's still coaching today. And he's doing like kamikaze, like everything under the sink stuff, and just like so it doesn't make sense to me. But sometimes you will hit like let's say he's training like 10 guys, maybe one guy is gonna really nail it.
That's why you always gotta check the tagged photos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the trick.
Yeah.
You're right. Otherwise, you're just gonna see the most amazing. If you have there's a book called, I love this book. If you ever get a chance to read it, it's called Fooled by Randomness. It's really short. Fooled by Randomness tries to convince you that you see patterns when they don't exist. He said, look, something like there's 10 stock managers. Imagine they don't know crap. They're flipping a coin every year. Even with 10 of them, one of them is going to get the right winnings, whatever you want with the flipping the coin, like 20% returns year on year and year. And you had a 50% chance each year. You just don't look at the rest. So if any coach can have a guy that just by accident it works great.
I know. Yeah, they always, that one guy who just nails it. But what about the other fucking 8? He spilled over or it's too flat or things like that. So we have the story about that. But you gotta be really careful. Like, obviously, like, rest in peace to the person who passed away. I'm not sure exactly what is the truth yet.
No, we don't.
I don't know if that detail.
The only thing we know is that because Dave Palumbo made a video about it. I checked it out. He apparently has the documents from the DA, and they've specified there's a victim named H.A. He's also specified he talked to that family. I don't know these people. I don't know the details of it. All that matters is from this video is not to demean Ameen. Also, by the way, I don't hope that he suffers in jail or has any kind. I don't even think he has an evil bone in his body, but he was genuinely a danger to society. So it's important that people understand that, at least in the case of Ibogaine, one time and your life can be over. And is it really worth? You don't need it. By the way, opiate withdrawal does not commonly kill people. Benzo withdrawal does, but you don't need it. And you might die. And why not try other potential? If you had to use it, don't use the flood dose immediately. There's so many ways to be careful. And like you said, the most important thing is, so one thing I wanted to say is that I said earlier that, okay, there's some shady characters around the AA community. There's also another kind. There are some of the best people you ever meet in your life. that act like religious people, that do things when nobody knows they're doing them, will drive you to the airport when nobody knows late at night, will have your back, will do everything for you because they live for the moral principles like religious people live for. When it's not convenient for them, they'll continue to do it. And not just out of self-interest. At some point, it becomes a spiritual life. They're like monks. There are these beautiful people there. If you search enough and pay attention, you'll find these people. And you can trust people, very much so. But if you don't know when someone's giving you something interesting, I have a video on my channel called How to Research. It's very short. We have scholar.google.com. I didn't have that when I was a kid. Because of that reason, it can be pretty easy for you guys to start to realize like different treatment mechanisms. Do they work? What does this ketamine therapies do? And you'll understand some of the mechanisms behind it, will at least help you understand when you're hearing pitches. Like nowadays, I hear a lot of people saying, not for treatment-resistant depression, but anything. I want to go do a psilocybin heroes dose. I want to do 4 grams of mushrooms. I tell them, like, I have a friend who is still schizophrenic from that one time. Like, did you know that most of us carry genes for schizophrenia? How are you going to know it's not going to happen to you? Why don't you try 800 milligrams and see how it reacted to you first? I mean, don't run these huge risks. I'm not telling people to take drugs. But
even my opinion on that is like, why do you want to do that? And why?
And ask yourself why. Exactly.
Yeah, ask yourself why to yourself and answer yourself in your head. And also, why aren't you doing therapy instead? Oh, it's a lot more work. I don't want to dig the past where there's trauma. This is where you need to go. Where it hurts the most, where you're the most afraid to go, you need the courage and go there and face it. If you take mushrooms, hero dose, yeah, your ego's gonna be crushed. You'll maybe go there, you'll be forced on you, then you'll go through it. But that's like a kind of easy. And then you can like maybe it will help you for 2, 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then it fades away because you go back into the environment who made you fucked up in the first place. So I think you need the tools to handle that fucked up environment and learn how to deal with it clean and sober. And then you need to do the therapy to deal with all the past that makes you how you are right now. So I think people are too focused sometimes on, hey, I'm an addict in recovery. There's nobody else, that loves drugs as much as I did. Like, to be honest, and every addict would say the same thing. So I get it. I would research about drugs. I would be willing to do whatever. But the thing is, now that I'm on the other side, like, why are people so interested in getting fucked up, even under the motives of like spiritual enlightenment or things like that? They need to like take a step back.
Very suspicious, yeah. Yeah, what's the reason?
Take a step back and like, what can I do actually to improve myself? What's the work? It's like bodybuilding. There's a difference between like, oh, what? There's ads on the Muscle Tech, for example. There were back then. Oh, this 8-week 6-week transformation. I was 30 pounds. I'm all jacked now. That's the easy fix. That's bullshit. Well, why would so what's the real thing? Consistency, discipline, and hard work. That's how you get the results, right? In bodybuilding. Same thing with like improving your, let's say, inner self or your life. It will take a lot of work. It will take a lot of a discipline, and it will take a while. Like therapy, CBT, even the 12 steps. There's a lot of shit that you can do for yourself. Even seeing a one-on-one shrink can help. There's a lot of things, group therapy. So it's like it's stuff people don't even want to do. I don't want to go to shrink. Why?
Yeah.
I don't want to. For me, so yeah, I kind of want to, but I don't want to cry. Why don't you want to cry?
You don't show weakness in front of somebody else, yeah?
Because it hurts.
Yeah.
No pain, no gain.
Yeah.
Right?
One thing I was thinking about, this was really brilliant. One way to look at it, right, is I feel like sometimes ex-addicts are always thinking about, how can I change? Because the thing about drugs, all our life, a natural human being, and sometimes I don't think all addicts are like this, but some addicts have this unique phenotype. There are people who had like low dopamine signaling naturally. When they get excited about something, they do usually better than other people at it. They go ahead with it. Sometimes they won't be consistent. Like 2-3 months, they'll get bored. These are the kind of people I'm talking about. These people, sometimes when they do get passionate about something, really take it they go very far. What kills them, the kryptonite, like Superman for these people, is encountering drugs. Why? You've always had low dopamine signaling. Now, a normal guy comes in, has a drink. He was okay. He went a little bit above okay. He's like, that's okay. Tomorrow I'm going to be okay. You went from actually shit, but you never knew, to being, whoa, I could do this. So the difference for you is way bigger. So logically, you're always thinking about this difference. Now, the problem is this: your whole life, you've had low dopamine signaling. So you've been struggling always, making your way, changing your environment around you to make it okay for your dopaminergic signaling. Once you took control, internal locus of control, and you can just smoke something and you're fine. Now, this is a huge problem for the human being. The human being was not evolved to do this. We're evolved when we have a problem to change our environment around us, to build a career, to build a family, to build friendships. But if you could just smoke or drink or whatever, and it doesn't matter at all, first you feel this awesome power that nobody affects you. You can, whatever could happen today, you can't get me. And then you don't care about the environment around you,
No.
right?
You
So
only care about like getting a feeling that whatever you felt, because for once in your life you felt like, wow, this is actually, it means it's like me. I tried some stuff when I was younger drinking. Then I went to my first rave and took some stuff, like a bunch of stuff, and then I was like, holy shit, this makes sense.
yeah, this makes sense.
Now, like, I get this now, and then it's like I've always like, this is when I wanted to do it more. And then it's just, there was other things that I added and it was even worse. So now the thing is, I was not comfortable in my life ever, scared. My baseline was like kind of scared, uncertain, worthless a bit, and because my parents got divorced, as a kid, it's like, for me, it was traumatic back then because I didn't know any better. And then you kind of, my whole life was like that. And then boom, I go there because of drugs. Normal is there, I go there. Yeah. And then I've always tried to chase that. And then the thing is, once you stop, boom, you go like even lower than this. So I'm like, man, everything was so dull and boring. And even my definition of like excitement and fun was only related to being there. There was a lot of adjustment, and it took a while, and so.
And there's a physical basis of that for you, because you're using a drug that causes physical ecstasy, even the physical sense of it. So for the audience to understand, don't ever use this drug because it may make you feel like you don't feel the same pleasure from normal things again. I don't know if you ever felt that, or is it long lasting? Like I don't want to get into details but you know what I mean.
No, I'm actually feeling the best I felt since I stopped doing drugs.
Wow, fantastic. Great.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I think it's just because it's related to, there's no chaos in my life, and I'm okay with it now. And I'm just, my recovery program is good, and I'm surrounded with people who are just positive, because obviously the people you hang out with is big, going to be a big influence on you, right? So I just cleaned that up really nice in the past like few years, but for sure the first few months, once you want to stop doing drugs, it's like, it's kind of hard to
empty in the brain.
It would take me, if I would go like really hard and I would go to rehab, it would take me maybe like 2 weeks to smile, 4 weeks to feel like I'm actually feeling all right. And then during those first 3 weeks, I hated myself more than anything in the world.
I know what you mean by the smile. Like, you in a camera, you try to smile, you look weird, right? It doesn't go up. You feel like a weird, awkward guy.
No, it's like I wouldn't want to smile. I had no sense of humor. There was nothing going on, right? But the self-hatred was probably the worst part. That I brought me into trouble. I got kicked out of a few rehabs because I was like becoming like very defiant against the authority, and I would like be violent with like the environment. And I never was violent with people really, but it was more like verbal with like the people in charge. I would be breaking stuff because all this hate inside me was just spilling over like a glass that's spilling over with the water, with the faucet that you keep pouring in, it's just falling over. My self-hatred was so big, but that took a lot of work to deal with. Plus, my brain being all like depressed from like the drop, so it was just terrible. But I think after 4 weeks, I would feel somewhat okay, depending, right? That was like back years ago. And then over time, you just learn to like enjoy the normal things, little things. But for sure, bodybuilding and training really helps. For me, like pushing myself pushing myself in the gym gives me a purpose. And one thing I've really noticed in the rehabs is that
Well, it's changing all those chemicals in your brain. It's literally
yeah,
giving you the you know, when you squat, you get adrenaline. When you do some cardio, you get endorphins. You get GABA also after cardio, so you relax a bit. If you ever tried a sauna before bed, it's wonderful. You get like a relaxation feeling. And
yeah.
all these growth factors from Ibogaine all come from cardio. Same exact growth factors. So it is a real difference. There's doing something there.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the thing is, as soon as I was funny thing, maybe it's related to that. As soon as I would start partying, the last thing I wanted to do is sleep or train. I would not
Yeah.
train when I was partying and do drugs. And then I would go to rehab, sleep it off. First thing I do when I wake up, go to the gym.
It's replacing each other. Yeah.
Yeah, it was never at the same time. I've never done it at the same time.
That's a good indication.
So yeah, that's why
I was going to mention.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. I was going to mention something. Also, a lot of times, so we're talking about people looking for this magic pill to solve the thing. And I was saying, once you internalize control, you're removing this whole thing of, I need to change my environment. Like, if you've been addicted to something for years, like you were talking about, there's going to be a lot of issues you haven't worked through emotionally, but also in your environment. There's going to be a wreckage. And the solution isn't like, I have to just bear the wreckage. No, you have to clean up the wreckage and physically take action. Also, the action reassociating in your brain. But there's another thing. People sometimes have this overwhelming, like, I have a friend here in Thailand who thinks this way. People can probably guess who it is, but he seems to think that when he uses marijuana, he's very creative. And I'm like, bro, do you know that I have like musician clients who will not use drugs at all because it makes you think you're making better music, but you're not. It's just a perception. And if you train yourself to be creative, you don't need to use a random drug to randomly mix things in your head. Like creativity, do you know what that is? In my opinion, obviously obnoxious, but my opinion is creativity is thievery, but artistic thievery. Like any real artist, a painter, he's taking little things from everywhere he's seen, and he spent his whole life looking at those things, and he's doing it soberly. What drunk? Well, maybe there's a couple of Van Gogh or whatever. What drunk artist do you know that was really that awesome and prolific and continuous? They're usually chain smokers like Picasso. They weren't doing LSD and just doing crazy consistent art.
I think a lot of artists will be really, really
maybe
good
I'm wrong.
Yeah, but I think everybody's different, right? So it might be good for somebody, but for somebody else. But I think why a lot of artists are good is because they have a lot of suffering in their life, and they're like suffering a lot. And what happens when somebody suffers a lot? They can do drugs to it. So I don't know if it's the drug making them creative, or it's actually just their whole traumatic life that they had, maybe. Because
I think that's more likely. They come together. It's not that doing the drug is making me do this.
If they're really like in pain and suffering too much, they can't do their art, so they will use something to relieve them. But then the whole fucking life of shit is what drives them to express themselves through the art form.
But my buddy's like, hey, if I'm gonna make a YouTube video, I should smoke some weed and come up with ideas. I'm like, no, you don't need to do that, bro. It's not the best way, I swear. Whatever creativity you have, you'll miss some spelling or something. It's not ideal. Like,
yeah, sure.
Anyway, another thing I want to mention, just one more thought I want to mention just for the audience. Antoine and I disagree on something briefly. I'm not completely sure I'm right or he's right, but his view is the mainstream among sober people, and probably is what you should follow. The one thing that I had, because of my experience with the Pacific group and because of my personal experience with it, I had a very bad anxiety disorder when I first got sober, which was made much worse by the fact that I was experiencing delirium tremens from the alcohol use. Yeah. So basically, I was having tremors, which I even have since childhood. So it was very bad. I was told not to take anything that could try to deal with this. Not talking about benzos or anything acute, but something like affecting my neurogenesis for the long term or something like that. And I found myself practicing the principles of the religious principles that are important: solidarity, confession, and accountability, and all of these things that we have in AA. But I found that later on, by accident, basically, I encountered some of these other medications for different reasons. And I found that it seemed, for some people, there must be many reasons why how people end up with drugs. Some people, like, for example, myself, I had a very unusual childhood. If you like look into my the kind of childhood I had in google.scholar.com or scholar.go.com, you'll find people born like that have smaller amygdalas, or more, not smaller, but also more pronounced, but more disconnected amygdalas. The amygdala is this ancient part of the brain, the lizard brain, that basically tells you when a lion is about to attack you. It's supposed to tell you it's to fear or to jump. This anxiety center. Yeah, from childhood, I'm always ready, always, and I move fast. I'm always not comfortable, and that's just how I am. So this thing builds up over time, some kind of angst. Now, if I was to use a drug, like one of these medicinal drugs that makes you feel better, like gabapentin or something like that, I'm just gonna end up. I don't know if you know this, bro, but if you take Valium, 3 months when you take Valium, it lowers your cortisol. 3 months later, at the same dose, you have normal cortisol levels. Now, if you take out the Valium, you're below baseline, just like we were talking about before. All those drugs that work acutely or through the GABA system, most of them work like that. But some, like antidepressants, the standard ones, for some people, like myself, made um, a huge benefit. What they made me feel was like, the way I would describe it is, well, there's three things I noticed. One was neurogenesis, like having just higher growth factors, even if it's the sauna and exercise, or if it's SSRIs, low dose with under the psychiatrist, or cerebrolysin, which is even cerebrolysin is less risky than SSRIs in some ways because it doesn't mess with your systems in your brain. It just gives you the growth factors. So if you take like cerebrolysin with GH in the same day, your sleep will be crazy good. Next day, your brain fog will be a bit there, and that's the feeling of the growth factors. And you'll notice, like over time, if something usually would bother you a lot, but then you would think about it 2 hours later and you'd have to pray on it or something, someone turned on you in a car. This time he turned on you, an hour later, you just get along with it. That's the plasticity. It's very small. Nobody would do it to abuse drugs, but it's a small advantage. For me, it was very helpful to adapt. And then another one, which is common, which doesn't affect feelings in the brain, was the low dose naltrexone example. Anything that lowers inflammation in the brain, being neuroinflammation, you have your immune system overactive because whatever, like especially if you're bodybuilding or something, you have a lot of stresses in your body. Your immune system might get overactive, might turn on your joints, might turn on your gut or something, right? A lot of people have colitis and that stuff. Anything that can lower your inflammation in a healthy way, like fish oil, EPA from fish oil, can potentially lower inflammation in the brain. Two of the ones that have done it in double-blind, placebo-controlled human studies is 2 grams of NAC a day, or I think NAC, NAC, or imagine, has shown antidepressant effect in 8 weeks, just from lowering inflammation. And EPA from fish oil also does it. And it's shown, if you take a rodent and inject it with one of these, what are called inflammatory cytokines from the immune system that get high when your body's stressed, it'll act depressed and anxious if you just inject it with it. So lowering inflammation, what's the possible bad side? Well, if you're lowering it with drugs, you could lower it so much that your body misses cancers. But if you're lowering it with fish oil, low dose naltrexone, which is you're not going to get a huge advantage, but your brain will be a bit calmer. Your anxiety will be a bit lower. That and the neurogenesis, I think, are somewhat helpful. And then for myself, and then for some people, I don't know if you ever experienced this. And by the way, I believe most wholeheartedly in cognitive behavioral therapy and also psychoanalysis for people that are good at it, and meditation, mindful meditation. But for the CBT, if your brain is neurogenic, so you see, in childhood, your brain can grow new neurons everywhere. So it can change. In adulthood, you can't teach an old dog new tricks because the brain can't change.
Way harder, yeah.
There's only 2 parts of the brain that still grow new factors, so they can change and they're small. But when you take an antidepressant, they're like quadruple or more than that, 10 times more. So when that happens, when you go to CBT, I did CBT on myself, by the way. So for example, I had this anxiety problem, right? But my shaking was a problem. And then the anxiety, if I saw you see me shaking during the withdrawal, I get more anxious, like a stuttering person. And then I see you see me stuttering and then I can't talk, right? Yeah. Horrible. Every time it happened in public, it would get way worse. Because now I remember that time, it's going to happen next time. And I'm not a coward. I don't know how this was happening to me. It was physically couldn't control my body. So what I did was, I didn't use the Valium, but what I did was I increased neurogenesis. So I increased neurogenesis enough for a period of time through an antidepressant that made neurogenesis by itself also lowers anxiety. Some people, if they were not addicts and had this problem, they could do CBT with like short term with a acute benzo or something like a 2.5 milligram benzo if you're not an addict under doctor supervision. But what you would do is this. You ever heard of a society called Toastmasters? So Toastmasters. Yeah, it's a society for people who are scared of public speaking in the US. You can just go for free. They meet, they're very nice people. And basically what they do is they'll clap for you and stuff while you give a bad speech. So I went over there, nervous as hell. Yeah, I was I was very nervous, but I was not anxious at that time. I've been taking it for 2 months, the antidepressant or something. I felt a bit better. And this was my theory. Psychiatrists didn't tell me to do this. I went there and I said, okay, the worst thing I could do for my anxiety thing is go speak in front of these people.
Yeah.
But these people are told not to laugh at me. So it should be good. So I went in, unfortunately, they picked me that day to talk. I went in the front, I shook a little bit, but nobody saw it. And then the next time I went to talk, they said, oh, this is one of the best speeches we've had in the last few weeks. I was like, whoa, nobody saw anything. And within a couple of months, the shaking went away. But I had the neurogenesis and I had the positive feedback and I made this. So I really believe in this. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to clarify, I am all for medication that will help people. Like, and in NA, like most people are on medication. But the Pacific group, because one of the three main values that we have that we always mention is open-mindedness, willingness, and honesty. And open-mindedness is the first one. So we have to be open-minded. So everybody's recovery is different. A lot of time, mistake that I've done in the past, or I've seen people do, is that they will judge somebody else's recovery. Oh, it's not the way that it. No, focus on your own. You need to focus on your own, what works for you. Because remember, life was unmanageable. You were suffering. You were pretty much killing yourself. So for somebody else, if they will use a medication and have a nice life, it's going to help them go on track and not do like drugs that will kill you. This is a win. So I think all these antidepressants and all that stuff is very good, but it needs to be, of course, supervised with a professional, a doctor, and has to be prescribed. And the motives, because the thing is, it's so easy also to go to a doctor and be like, oh, I need this benzo. I'm very stressed out in public, blah, blah, blah. But it's all a lie. And you're just getting that for it. So because the thing is,
very easy.
A lot of addicts, including myself, it's very easy to like convince yourself you need something. But if you dig to what what the motive is, oh, I just want something to feel different. That's not good.
Yeah. Specifically, bro, any medication that they could feel within 2 weeks is not going to work. It has to be medications that don't have an acute effect. Like SSRIs, you don't even feel it for a month. That's why it's not addictive. You don't notice when you take it, you don't notice they took it that day. But over time, you notice maybe I'm shifting a little bit, those kinds. But the problem is the addict can never choose it for himself. He really needs expert psychiatrists to guide them. Yeah, otherwise, you're gonna do the same thing like he's saying. No. One more thing I just want to mention. Do you ever notice? We're talking way longer than I planned, but do you ever notice that people have this reluctance about accepting the higher power? And one of the things that they'll do is there's these AA groups that are like no higher power. Have you seen this?
Yeah, there's a lot of like modification. There's even one.
Yeah, in LA, there's one.
Yeah, there's a one that's like even the Buddhist, and there's one that's called Smart Recovery. It's
smart,
different.
Smart. Yeah.
So it's like they do CBT plus they do like step stuff without like the higher power. But the thing is,
it's integral to it.
I was so like desperate to like change and find a solution. They told me in my first rehab, hey, you have to believe in a higher power. I'm like, fuck, I don't believe in one. Like, I just believe in whatever. So I chose the Thor, the god of thunder, just to have like something to like practice.
I remember your necklace.
Yeah. I always have that. And then eventually it changed, and now it's like I do have a higher power. I just don't know. I can't explain it with the words I have because it's where it is. It's these words were created on this material plane, for example. So I can't use things that are created here to explain what's something I don't even know. But I just know that there's something out there, and I personally I should pray more and use it more in my program. But it's not my first reaction, and the only times I've prayed with all my heart was the time that I was like suffering the most. I was like, okay, now please help me. This is like I went on my knees and stuff handful of times in my life, but
that's the point of it, right? Is to remind us constantly that we are so fallible and small beyond what is something greater than us. And it's not whether the higher power is listening to us, it's for us to sit in gratitude and admire. Because think about every society we've ever come across in the world experience the same kind of religion. They sacrifice, they pray to idols, they have rituals. Why? It's by accident? Or did every society that didn't do that die off? Is that part of like an evolutionary design thing that keeps human beings?
It's like mass therapy for some maybe countries or groups of people.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, but for sure. But the thing is that I've seen people in they everybody's higher power is different though. That's the part of the thing too. Like some people they just believe in karma. Some people they just believe in like a so the atheist version of God in the meeting is called good orderly direction. God.
Oh, I've never.
So the righteous way, good orderly direction. So you just ask yourself, what's the most righteous way? So for those who don't believe in the sky daddy, because whatever, like they will use that good orderly direction. Or I've also like in AA group of drunks because the
Yeah, yeah,
meeting is
yeah.
greater than yourself. The
That's
group
true.
is more than you. So people they will have different versions of higher power, but in the program, if you just try to have one, you're open minded enough, you'll have a much better chance at staying clean. But it can be anything. It can be nature,
Yeah.
whatever. It doesn't have to be anything. It's people put a lot of pressure on that. But me, I was really willing to like do whatever it took. It's like I didn't care. Hey, you would have to tell me like, hey, Antoine, you have to believe in God so you can get this bag of drugs. I'm like, hell, hell, Jesus,
You're
like,
lucky.
so now why would I not be as willing to stop doing drugs, right? So
I had this.
yeah,
I had this.
but that yeah,
No, no, go ahead.
yeah, because
Yeah.
the word God scares a lot of people. That's why
Yes.
in we actually use a higher power a lot because God is attached to religion. But it's the thing with the 12 step. It's not a religious program. It's a spiritual program. That's the thing. But it's just the AA was inspired by some religious principles from the Oxford group and stuff. So stuff was
Mm.
inspired by them, but then they just changed the wording so it would be available to anybody from all creeds of life, all religion, all races, all status, so everybody can do it. But it is
I
challenging
had a
to work out though.
tremendous, tremendous difficulty for the people that are listening to this that think they're gonna have a difficulty with this. I had a tremendous difficulty. My brain was very stubborn, and at the time, I was convinced that I don't know, I could not get this God thing the way they're describing it to me. It caused me a lot of problems initially, like complete reservations. I couldn't deal with anything. Over time, I developed this. I think this is hard to disagree with, honestly, and I don't want to take much more time. But if you think so, say you believe that there's no God, and you have the feeling of like the militant atheist, right? So you think the world was created by randomness. Okay, whatever this random occurrence that created the entire universe is, this thing you don't understand, right? And you don't need to understand it. It's just something so much beyond you that you're nothing compared to it, right? Say that this whole universe thing we can call God. It includes everything on the universe, including you. This whole system, which works somehow by itself without you doing anything about it and not understanding anything about it. Say this whole system has never listened to you once in your life. It doesn't matter. When you're praying to God or consoling or communing with God, is that? When you're doing that, you're talking to God, but it's not that God should necessarily talk back to you. What you're doing is showing gratefulness because you were given this existence that you didn't deserve, that you don't know how it happened. And what you're supposed to show is what we say in Arabic, subhanallah, which means praising God, to say, thank you for what you've done for us. I don't understand you, but I respect you. And I see that all your creatures in the world seem to work in unison in a way that goes with the flow of the river of life and not swimming against the river. I have been swimming against the river. Clearly, I don't know what I'm doing because I'm about to die. So maybe I should look at the river of life, observe nature, and pray to God in the sense that I am learning from God, from the universe. God is what I don't know, and that's everything. And so it gives you respect, gratitude, communion. These are maybe the most important parts of religion. What do you think? Right? It's hard to disagree with that.
No, it is hard because the thing is, you
That
would
trips
think
him up is
anybody.
the word God. That's all.
No, that's what I mean. You just describe
Yeah.
God pretty much.
Yeah,
Just
that's good. To me, that's
some people would describe the same God using different words.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So the thing is, it's all the same thing. That's my opinion too. It's like all the religions are they're trying to explain what you just tried to explain. It's
Yeah.
just really
And
hard to do.
other people get really caught up on this idea that there's one religion, he says he has a beard and he has calm down. Okay, back off. Don't get stuck on that one. If somebody told you there's a guy listening to you and you don't believe him, does that mean that this whole universe, this grand, beautiful thing that
Yeah.
nobody understands, is not before you? If you see a nice car, don't you say, wow, this is a beautiful car? If you said, wow, this is a beautiful life every day, you wouldn't drink. You know, that's what they're really saying to you at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Well, if you didn't like it, I mean, if you liked it, you accept it fully as it is, you would want to change it.
Yeah, also. And you would want to go with the flow of life. Like in
Yeah.
my mind, if we do things that are very unhealthy for ourselves, even in that way, we're going against the flow of life. I tend to do it naturally,
Well,
which is
that
why my channel is called Leo
also,
Longevity.
you could say it's self-will, and then going with the flow of the river is kind of God's will in a sense.
True. And how do you know God's will? By learning God, by watching the flow of the universe also, which is that gratitude and meditation and observation. This is a good note to leave. Wait, before we do, so Antoine told me that I should make this video, although originally I thought I shouldn't, but I thank you for encouraging me. But Antoine, I was thinking before, I was supposed to do another reaction video to you. So maybe once in a while, if there's a topic that relates to addicts or stuff like that, we could do this series, which I haven't concluded on the name yet. I'm going to poll you today because I have so many more names, but some of them are cool, like Anabolics Anonymous, Redemption, and Recovery.
What is it? Anabolics?
Anabolics Anonymous, because it makes it less, lighthearted. And then
Yeah.
it says Redemption and Recovery. But there's a bunch of others. I'll send you the full list after.
Yeah.
Potentially that. And otherwise, I wanted to congratulate you on 2022. I know that you had a lot of setbacks with the bicep tears and stuff like that, but your condition was fantastic. And the entire world saw it. And especially the competition leading up to the Olympia or the one before that. I don't remember which one.
The Chicago
where you looked insane. People thought you could have won the last competition or something, right? Yeah, it was fantastic. You did a great job, brother. We're very proud of you.
Thanks. Yeah.
What are you planning? Are you planning to compete earlier in the year?
No, I think I'm going to do the opposite. I'm just clearing off the blood work, getting healthy, and just like doing everything right, and getting another heart scan. And yeah, just to be safe, And I think I'm going to just, after all that, I'm going to gain some muscle to have the right improvement to be more of caliber against some of the top guys, and really give it a good shot, because I probably only have like 3-4 years maximum competing, because I've been competing like since 2004.
Early, yeah, I remember.
It's a long time. So yeah, so I think I'm gonna take the year off to just get healthy, gain muscle, and so when I come back, there's a drastic improvement. Give it a shot, and then after that, you give it a really good go, have the muscle I need, and then just refine that for a couple of years, and then just hang it up, because I want to do my best, reach my full potential, and I think I just need another 3 years to do so, 3-4 years to do so. So I'm going to compete I'm going to try to get an invite for the 2024 Arnold Classic.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Are you going to do a calcium angiogram with dye?
Yeah. I did it last time. I'll do another one now.
Oh, you did that one also?
Yeah, I did that, and I'm going to do a...
Or was it a CT score just of the corner? Was it a detailed one where they pumped the dye, or just the...
There was no blockages, but my calcium score was elevated. But I always wondered, is it because of like all the fucking shit I did? Because my blood pressure must have been in the 200s for days on end when I was partying.
No. It's because of the stimulant. Absolutely. If you didn't know that, absolutely, bro. That was the stimulant. Yes. Because look what happens when your blood vessels tighten up, which always happens. We don't even notice it. Heart rate rises, blood vessels tighten up. All that little blood pushing on the blood vessel causes a little tear, and the calcium is healing it.
Yes.
Now that's the problem with people that had high heart rates and stuff. But yours wasn't as high as I thought, right?
No, I think it was like...
We talked about it.
It's really high for my age. It's 130. But
130, not 1,000.
130.
Oh, yeah, not 1,300.
No, 130.
Oh, we talked about it. Okay, yeah, I was worried, and then you told it.
No, it's supposed to be 0, right?
It's supposed to be 0, but bro, 1,000 was like almost a death sentence.
No,
it's a very big difference. Yeah.
Not good. But me, there's like with the angiogram, with the contrast dye, there's like no blockages. So I want to do it again after competing for a whole year, see like what the numbers are, because it might have been the same thing for like 5 years and never changed like that.
Well, what it might be, keep in mind, right? The calcium gets put in about 10 years after the damage. So it might get worse, but you don't want to do it that often. You want to do it like because that does damage the area. But
Yeah,
can I ask you something real quick?
Yeah.
Do you take fish oil? Because you know they approved fish oil for this treatment, right? It's called Vasepa.
Yeah, I use
4 grams EPA a day reduces heart attacks by 40% or so, and people who've already had one in the last few years. It's massive.
Yeah, no, I use fish oil every day. Actually, I just ran out like 2 days ago. I gotta grab one, but I use a really good one.
But keep in mind, the DHA raises your LDL cholesterol. The EPA barely does. The EPA is the one that really, really improves heart health. I can send you the names of them later.
Yeah, just send it to me. Yeah, curious.
All right, brother. It was great to talk to you. This was very insightful.